Okay, beautiful. And we are live. All right, Kierk, thank you so much for joining us. Let's have a look on LinkedIn. 6 people coming in so far. Beautiful. It is working. The systems are working, my friend.
All systems working. Let's go.
Okay. and people like you, especially, me too, although I've been more on the sales and marketing side of the house, we know how many systems have to be involved for just this to happen. So all systems working means quite a lot to us. Kierk, please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us, what it is you do for a living. Let's start there, please.
Sure. So I'm the VP of Customer Success at Claroty. So I'm responsible for every customer that purchases solution from Claroty. So once they make that decision, it's my team's responsibility to ensure that they're getting value, they're getting support, and that they're happy with what they purchase. So it's a very rewarding but challenging role, and I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, good man. That's wonderful. And of course, you're we don't want to say former family member, do we? It's always in the family, right? Families extend. Sure. Families go around the world. So formerly a colleague too, ladies and gentlemen. So for those of us listening in the archive, we are going to discuss today the extended Internet of Things. And I'm going to be a learner on this journey, as I always am, week in, week out. Let's start with the problem. And reminder, it's an AMA, it's an Ask Me Anything. And so I already see, hey, Miguel, thanks for joining, man. Hello, Miguel. Miguel's a great colleague. I don't know if you crossed over with Miguel, but he's a wonderful security engineer who's also a neighbor and a friend of mine. And so thanks for joining us, man. And by all means, jump in. So yes, what is the problem? Let's start with that. The internet became an awesome thing, and then all of a sudden we had lots of awesome things.
Yeah, so I mean, most companies have been trying to solve for their IT assets, right, and to secure their IT assets, right? Their networks, their IT assets that are connected to those networks. But the problem really is now that we've secured those to a large degree, we need to focus on our operational assets, right, or our clinical assets if we're in healthcare, right? So our operational technology, the systems that control our building management systems, our power supplies, our water filtration units, our medical devices that are delivering patient care, or our general IoT devices that are in the building, like camera systems, door lock systems, or even television monitors, or anything that has smart connectivity capabilities. This is a new area for many organizations to be able to go and try and secure. The major issue that we've had is that there has been no inventory of these assets in our environment. We've never been able to sufficiently visualize the assets that are in our environment. So we don't know what we don't know in this case, right? So we don't know what's connected. So there are new tools now available that allow you to visualize your connected assets in your operational technology environments, your IoT environments, or your IoMT environments. So you can see the assets that are there, and then you can get a clear representation of those assets with make, model, manufacturer, firmware version, even applications that run on these systems. And then we can come back and say, hey, there's risks associated with these operating systems and these devices, or these devices with this type of firmware. And so now you're presented with basically an inventory and risk associated with that. That's like the first step. We never saw it before. Now we do. And that's like the major problem. Visualization of what's connected in our operational environment that we've never seen before.
Okay, I've got a quick question before we continue from there. So does your organization deal with the legal implication of not knowing where these assets are? Is that an issue? Are CISOs, are other people within organizations wondering, well, I've got all this stuff connected to the internet that is actually operational. I should be deeply concerned? Or do you feel that, there isn't as much pressure, for them to legally understand this?
No, I mean, look, we can continue to bury our heads in the sand on certain categories or certain areas because we don't want or don't like the results of investigation down that path. That's what we call kind of the crap moment, right? When you actually get the inventory showing up in a dashboard and you see what it is and you didn't realize that that's how much you had or how much risk is there. Now, once you get to that point, that's a huge inflection point for a company, right? There is risk there. There could be legal risk there. Now you see devices talking to the internet that of a make model manufacturer that you're like, why in the heck is an infusion pump, talking to Russia or whatever it might be. You see anomalies because now you're able to see they're not just showing up as an IP address anymore. They're showing up as a verified asset with a MAC address, make model, manufacturer, serial number, everything needed to make a business decision about risk. And that's the overwhelming moment that we find with our customers where they need the most help.
Right. So I'm getting the picture I'm getting is it's an eye-opening moment. And from that point onwards, you can't put your head back in the sand, right? I mean, it's a little unfair for me to say that it was in the sand. I don't quite mean it that way. If you don't have eyes to see it, but I think, yeah, it's a scary moment, right? And sometimes it might uncover a litany of, I've got more things to do in life, right? So, yeah, it can't be ignored. Well, then, okay, so the next step of the journey then must be holding people's hand into, how can we help with this? And Miguel's saying, you can't protect what you can't see. Exactly, my friend. And so, seeing also comes with the responsibility of doing. So at this point, you must be helping people do, because it's like you can't just throw a messy meal down and say, or the ingredients down. You can't throw the ingredients down without being the chef that also prepares the meal for them, I suppose.
Yeah, I can imagine just like, hey, here you go. Here's all your risk.
Right.
You guys are kind of screwed here. So have a nice day, And that's not what happens here, right?
Okay.
You present that. Now, of course, when I was at Checkpoint, one of the things that we had when we were doing DLP, like POCs, this was a long time ago, but basically we would show the customer some of their data that was leaving the organization and basically tell us, pack that up, get out of here. I can't take that up to management. Now, this was back in the early days of kind of that risk segment where you have data loss occurring and it's going to a place that it shouldn't go, or you're just seeing it and you just don't have the time or cycles to address it. I think, fortunately for all of us, we're at a different place now. So when we present the asset inventory and the risks associated with the assets that have been discovered, XIoT assets, that is, there's more of a willingness to work through it, right? It is that initial like, oh gosh, where do we start? But that's where my team comes in, and that's how we work with folks, right? So we have playbooks that we've built related to, where do you start, right? So first thing to do is if we can patch a firmware, let's go patch a firmware if that's an opportunity, right? Not everything is patchable. In some cases, the device may be a medical device, FDA regulated, and there is no approved firmware for that device at this time. So then how do we get around it? Maybe it's a compensating control. Maybe it's moving it to a special VLAN, or maybe it's you have a segmentation tool. You could use a checkpoint firewall, or you could use a NAC solution to be able to segment that device onto its own secure area. So basically clinical zero trust or zero trust if it's in an operational environment. So those are some of the options and the plays that can be run. But what you really want to do, what we try and get our customers to do, is to really lead with what's going to make the biggest impact first, kind of that 20% of the work to get the 80% of the results that you're searching for.
Do you find that there's more people other than the department of the CISO that are involved in this now, or is the CISO still carrying the weight of this? Yeah, certainly the CISO will always carry the weight, but I'd like to believe that now we've gone from that early stage you were mentioning with DLP. So this is probably 15-ish years ago, roughly. And I think, it was like, put that cat back in the bag, because I, as the CISO, have very limited resources. I've got all that, and now you've just shown me this. Ouch. That might be a reflection also that person is carrying a responsibility that needs to be distributed and shared. And I mean that, the responsibility of risk for the organization, I don't know that entirely lays on the CISO's shoulders. So are you seeing other people being involved in the decision-making and the evaluation of these discoveries?
So in many cases, depending on the size of the company, you'll see their OT environments and their IT environments are separate. You have different people that are responsible for those. You have different vendors and different expertise in those realms. What we're starting to see now is more of the CISO having the operational technology roll up through the CISO, right? Where that was not the case for many of the customers in the past. It's something that's changing now. So the CISO now has control and has the ability to create policy for the OT environment. Now, there may not be a strong background for the CISO with OT, so you need, to rely on the team to help make sure the controls in the program that you're trying to put in place will actually be effective in your operational technology environment. But I think it's an important point to bring up that you highlight is like, look, the CISO wasn't always responsible for OT environments because OT environments weren't connected before, right? That's an important thing. People forget they're starting to be connected now, right? Building management systems, smart elevators, power control systems, water filtration, freezers, tube systems in hospitals, anything HVAC. If you take over a building and you shut it down, all of the other IoT or operational or IoMT devices that could be inside there are irrelevant too. So it's really the fact that these devices are connected now more than ever, right? And now they're being exposed to IT level attacks that they weren't exposed to before.
Yeah, it reminds me that so after the Russia-Ukraine thing started earlier this year, about a month ago, the current administration put out a sort of not a warning shot to Russia, but it was these are the I think there were 11 sectors that you're not allowed to hack. It's like I realize there's games being played here and whatever. I mean, I'm not going to get into opinions of the war, whether it's a proxy war or whatever, but these things are happening. And so I wondered, did after that memo from the White House, did you see anybody saying, oh, I fit into these categories and I should be careful here? Or does that not come into play for people? Does CISA get involved in any of your dialogues?
So my team didn't really see that. Perhaps our research team, Team 82, did. They're responsible for a lot of the research into the XIoT vulnerabilities that we see. I think in the first half of 2022, we saw about 747 new XIoT vulnerabilities. And when I say XIoT, that includes like OT, IoMT, and IoT assets. So all of your operational technology or your enterprise IoT assets or your medical device, your connected medical devices, 747 basically new vulnerabilities in the first half of 2022. 60% of those, I believe, were high or critical score on the CVE. So, I mean, this is now 15% of all vulnerabilities. Our XIoT vulnerabilities account for 15% of all vulnerabilities.
Oh, really?
Okay. Now. Yeah. So this is a kind of a ripe area for hackers to go after as these systems are getting connected for either the first time or haven't been connected for very long. There's not, basic mature IT processes for securing these devices, and so people are really struggling and are investing heavily in this area.
And for the ladies and gentlemen in the audience, when Kierk and I are just saying XIoT, we don't mean former IoT. X is for extended, right? So extended, correct. So the IoT of absolutely everything. I mean, I suppose I could say it like that. So this is interesting. So tell me about this research group. Do you have any sort of real world examples of vulnerabilities that have actually happened? Because I must admit, okay, well, so you said 15%, so there must be. Prior to the last, let's say, 2 years, and this could be a mistake on my part, so I'd like to be corrected, I had seen IoT vulnerability as theoretical. Now, am I wrong? Certainly now I would be, but I think I'm still being a little bit convinced. But you just said 15%. So just give us a little bit of shock and awe without the typical, you guys always do shock and awe.
Sure. So I think it's called Indestroyer. Was some malware that was originated, I think, in 2016, but I guess April of this year, or maybe even earlier, when Russia attacked Ukraine, there was a variant of that in Destroyer. It's in Destroyer 2 or something like that. Basically, it was targeting all the electrical systems in Ukraine, probably launched by Russia, right? Where basically they were able to, or would be able to compromise, those electrical, power systems, power plants. The malware would get in and basically, either kill processes or rename applications so they couldn't be auto restarted by, the staff, and just basically cause havoc, to your ability to deliver power and services to the Ukrainian people and their military. And so it was designed to be a service disruptor. So that's one thing. Our Team 82 group also came up with some research that they titled Evil PLC. And Evil PLC, I think they did a talk on it at Black Hat, but basically how one PLC system, when infected, can infect others, and also be able to basically shut down your entire OT operation. Okay. So I'm not on the research team. I don't have all of the deep details, Eddie, but high level stuff that does come to me, and we convey that to our customers and try and give them information so they can make choices about how they want to segment, patch, or update firmware for those systems.
Well, then the last geeky question would be then, if the severity is that high for these vulnerabilities, does that mean that threat actors can go lateral into the corporate network from an IoT device? Is that mildly easy for them to do?
Yeah, I think it's possible, but usually they're going to ride the IT network into the OT environment. OT environments typically have the Purdue model in effect, right, which is a multi-level, 5-level environment where basically you can only talk one level down or one level up, and that's the Purdue model, and that is observed in the OT environments, and they follow strict adherence to that. So if you're at a automotive company and there's robots on the floor, those robots on the floor that are running and communicating with their control system or their control their PC front end, that's not on the IT network, right? It's one level up, right? Now there may be a jump point from that system to another system that's eventually on the IT network, but that's how they do the segmentation. Typically is through the model. So yeah. you don't get a lot of things talking back and forth, but it is possible where a vendor comes in with some malware that plugs into a robot or something, and all of a sudden that device gets infected, and it can spread across the OT environment. It could spread to the IT environment in some way, but usually we'll see it going the other way, right? Where you don't have proper segmentation between your IT and your OT environments, and you're allowing devices to communicate. It's like allowing a host on the internet to communicate to a host on the inside of your network without going through a DMZ. It's
gotcha. Yeah. Okay, so you lead the customer engagement and success over there. So scrub for anonymity, but give me a few stories. Like, lead us through the customer journey with a real world example. So you've made a discovery. What you said at the beginning of this, the low hanging fruit is, let's call it that. You make a discovery. Small low hanging fruit firmware. It's like, let's get going here, and obviously you're having to do things to make sure that firmware update doesn't break other things later, right? So I imagine that's probably quite the journey right there. I'm calling that low-hanging fruit. That's more like really tilling the ground.
It can be, yeah. So if I give an example, maybe for healthcare, like, so you have a medical device that has a vulnerability in the firmware, right? And it's the vendor discloses that medical device has that vulnerability, and you're at a place right now where if there's not a patch for that from the medical device vendor, or if it's not FDA, if we can't get the ability to patch it without going through additional FDA regulatory process, you may not be able to patch that. So you are then faced with a challenge, right? So, and only biomedical engineers are really allowed to patch, medical devices, patient care devices, because they go through certification and training to do so. And so it's not just like you can have an IT person show up and patch a medical device. It doesn't work like that. Biomed must manage, maintain, and monitor these devices. So you're in partnership with this group. However, let's say that there is a known vulnerability. It cannot be patched. You cannot run, endpoint detection and EDR software on a number of medical devices, right? Some of them you can. So being able, again, to go back to that playbook that says, is there a firmware that fixes this? No. Can it run EDR software? No. The only other option at that point is to either accept the risk or to do micro segmentation, along with whether it's with a firewall vendor like Check Point or whether it's a NAC vendor, where you can then segment that individual device to only be able to communicate to the devices that it needs to, therefore reducing the risk for the segment that it's on. And so those are your options and your plays that you can run, and those are super common for the healthcare portion of what Claroty does, where it's you're basically going through a list, right? It's a checklist of can't do it, can't do it, can't do it, accept risk or segment, right? Those are some of the things that are part of the plays.
So you're working with biomedical engineers, you're working with the department of the CISO, you're working with OT. So you've got three distinct groups with their own KPIs and the usual sort of corporate structure of challenges to kind of jump through.
And the CFO.
Are you sure? Yes. Yeah, that's right. Of course. The CFO needs to be involved in all.
The CFO, not to cut you off, but the CFO is very interested in operational efficiency. Like how efficient is this medical device that's being deployed operating, right? Do I really need to go buy more MRIs or more vents or patient monitoring devices when I can clearly see the utilization is lower here? This is an area, I think, for innovation for companies like ours, for the more the industrial side of the house. When you look at like a manufacturing environment, there's so many variables there. Like if you do it for healthcare, it's easier because you can do it device by device for efficiency. And then you can work with the CFO to show the current utilization and benefits to just moving devices around the environment in order to gain efficiency, where rather than just having a blank check you sign every year because you're supposed to replace 15% of your medical devices every year. In an operational environment, it's like it's a whole entity, right? So everything depends on the phase in front of it, right? As you manufacture a car, or as you do food and bev, or whatever you're doing from a manufacturing perspective, being able to look at that from a performance area, I think is an area where companies like us will go in the future to try and increase efficiency of things, or at least offer insights into how they can be more efficient in the manufacturing process.
So that's great. I had never thought about that. So if I've understood that correctly, in the pre-IoT days, a CFO would have, I'll just pick, I don't know, an MRI machine, whatever, would have relied on manual reports, which can be manipulated, and to say, yeah, this MRI machine's being used 10 times a week or whatever it might be. And of course, that CFO has to calculate the length of time, the amortization of the fee of that very expensive machine based on the number of times it's working. With technology, with innovation in this area, we are going to identify all of these IoT devices, and we're going to say, this is how much they're being used, and this is how much they could be used more efficiently. That I think is fantastic. This is what
it's better than the alternative, which is anytime you talk cybersecurity with a customer, there's cost associated with it, right? Where's the ROI on reducing risk? Right?
Yeah,
I mean, you can say, oh, it'll likely increase, but that's not. It's hard to quantify that. But if you can say that this MRI system is used 54% of the time, it conducted, 8 scans a day, and those were of these types of body parts. Those are small, short scans. We should be able to do more. scans the NAT, and therefore the data point can be leveraged by finance to push back on large capital expenditures related to just the hey, well, this is what we've always done. Every 2 years we buy another MRI device or whatever it is.
Right, right.
They have their own processes. But we even can show you your inventory as it relates to other similar size HDOs for the number of, for the fleets that you have, right? And all of that. So the goal is to help the tool pay for itself, right? And it makes it easier when it comes to renewing, which again, I'm responsible for all customers, all renewals, and all of the enablement. So that makes it easier when the customer sees value on that side.
It's what I call the holy grail of internet security, right? Turning it from a cost center to a profit center. Have you come across this BISO title very much, Business Information Security Officer? It's just in the last year or two that I've heard this one come up. And that's the role. The role is to take security and no, it's not just that for the role, and make it a cost center. So to not a profit center, excuse me, but to look at the role and say, okay, how can we find efficiencies? So a BISO would work with you on exactly that problem, so that the CFO, who to be fair to most CFOs, unless they work in big tech companies, are accountants. They're to MBAs and they're CAs, etc. So the sort of the black box of IT is very mysterious to them. But we can't have that conversation anymore. It can't be mysterious, and the CISO can't say this is geek stuff and you just don't understand. Let me have it. And the CFO can't hide under it's geek stuff. I just don't understand it, right? So that's a beautiful marriage, man. I hadn't thought of that one before. So you've got that person in the decision as well as OT, as well as.
And you have supply chain with which really CFO levers supply chain, that group there. So that could be your BISO area. All we need is more acronyms, right? And every day a new acronym.
People outside our industry hate us for it.
We also look at like cyber insurance as an area, right? So the rates are going up. The cyber insurance providers expect more from their clients. So if you can show things like programmatic risk reduction for your operational assets, you could then enjoy a cost savings on your cyber insurance renewal. And we've had customers that have gone down that path, and we've helped them provide those reports and everything, risk reduction over time. So the risks that you were insuring us for last year aren't the same risks that we have this year, because we've reduced it. Now, always there's the unknown and things that are to come forward. But at the end of the day, I think that does some ability to reduce your overall rates, which can also be a ROI back to the business. So there's hopefully we find more arrows in our quiver that we can use to justify the reasons why we have certain technologies in the environment to reduce risk.
Well, as Miguel said earlier, you can't protect what you can't see, and when you start seeing it, you can protect it, lower the risk, and then hopefully lower the insurance premiums. Do you deal a lot with insurance? Because I wouldn't mind going down that rabbit hole, but if that's not an area you've got people to do that, no.
I don't. I just try and we try and give the customer the information that's needed for that. And I think we've looked at partnering with companies that provide this and then utilize our visibility capabilities and risk dashboards to allow them to make the cyber insurance company to make a better decision about what that rate should be for the customer. It's almost like they're dropping a POV in the customer environment and looking at the risks that they're going to have. I mean, that's kind of some of the talks that I've heard, but I'm not involved in really any of that stuff. I just want to make sure that the team is getting the data to the customer if they are up for a new cyber insurance renewal and they want to show that progress has been made. Those are the things that we want to help with.
So we've focused a fair bit on discovery of XIoT. Is your organization also putting sort of light footprints of security on these devices? I mean, so once you've updated the firmware, there's obviously algorithms that threat actors can write to attempt to still penetrate when there is updated firmware. So what are we doing about now taking sort of a next step of securing them?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a step back and just kind of describe what we do in a little bit of detail, and then I'll kind of get into that question. So we are a visibility vendor, and there's many others in our space, whether it be XIoT or like OT or IoMT or enterprise IoT. Basically what we do and the others do is we sit passively and we listen off a span or a tap port, or we can be configured to get information sent to us through things like SolarWinds or SNMP. We don't want to be intrusive on the network. We want to listen to the traffic, and we want to use our deep inspection parsers to be able to accurately tell you what's on the wire from an inventory perspective. Okay, so we do have active capabilities as well. So you can configure your collection server to actually scan. We also have a dissolvable agent that can sit on a host, like a Windows machine, and scan, but it's only going to scan on the protocols that we have. And those could be OT protocols, IoMT or IoT type protocols, 300-400 different protocols that these operational technology assets use to communicate, right? So if we're actively querying, we can do that, or we can passively listen. We create a large database of assets, right? Those assets are all broken down by, the vendor. It can be hundreds and hundreds of vendors, make, model, manufacturer, serial number. All of those things can be that. So you have basically a giant spreadsheet in the cloud with a nice GUI front end that allows you to filter this and see your risk, right? So that's where we start. From there, then it gets into that, enforcement piece that you were talking about, right? How do we address that? Right. That's where we take our industry knowledge and others in our space as well. We'll create policies, basically access control lists for that make, model, manufacturer. That device, it has specific protocols it uses. It communicates in a specific way to this server or this agent or whatever. We know what that is, and we can then give you those policies, which you can automate into a checkpoint firewall, automate into your NAC itself, and be able to then dynamically block those devices where communication is outside of scope, right? And so this happens automatically. Think about like most firewall vendors, right? Most things are identified as an IP address in the system,
right?
But many IoT devices are dynamic, right? Their IPs are going to change all the time. Just think like an infusion pump moving from floor to floor, hall to hall, patient room to patient room. It's going to connect to a different access point. It's going to have a different IP address, and it's going to do so in real time, multiple times over the course of the day. You can't hard code that IP address unless it's a statically assigned IP address. In many cases, that's not how it's done. So we need to be able to then share our inventory with Checkpoint, share our inventory to the other NAC vendor or whoever, share that inventory in near real time so that as updates to these devices occur, we know that it's this particular IP address or with this particular MAC address, and that's that real device. And basically you can follow it around and have accurate protections delivered by Checkpoint to that asset as it moves around, because we're sharing that information with you.
Gotcha. Beautiful partnership, man. That's really cool. And in fact, that might be a beautiful note to end our session on, right? Because then the various security vendors are going to sort of take it from there. It's like, great, thanks for giving us eyes to see. That's what we needed. We needed the flashlight in the darkness of the XIoT world here of how many billions of devices now? Let's end on that note. Like, that's really overwhelming. 26 billion?
Yeah, there's over 25 billion now, I believe. And I think by, I don't know, what Gartner said was it 2024 to 2025, we'll have over probably 50 billion connected assets of these XIoT devices or cyber physical systems. I think Gartner will come out with a magic quadrant for this as well before too long. This is definitely an area for people to shine the flashlight into the darkness, right, where you were using, in order to mature their overall cybersecurity strength in their environment.
Right, beautiful. Well, listen, thank you for giving us the flashlight, my friend. Thank you for giving us some eyes to see. Quiet audience today, that's okay. It's a Monday, it's in November. People are starting to think about Thanksgiving already, maybe.
Maybe. That's one of my favorite holidays, that's for sure.
Well, listen, Kierk, stay right there so I can say a proper goodbye to you. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you listening in the archive later, thank you very much for joining us. By the way, I always like to say this. Where can we find you on LinkedIn? You've got an unusual name. You're probably the only one, aren't you?
I don't know for sure. I actually have never really done that. Yeah. So,
okay. But
no,
people, I'm sure,
yeah,
if
you can just type in Kierk Sanderlin if you want to connect and have a conversation. I'm happy to do that. There is no other Kierk Sanderlin, that's for sure. There's probably another Kierk, but not Kierk Sanderlin. So.
Sweet of you to offer it. I'm sure people will dial in at some point in the future. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next week. And Kierk, thank you. Awesome. Stay